Hello and welcome to the big picture. The last 2 years in Pakistan has seen a confrontation between the judiciary and the government. Today it has reached a very interesting and decisive stage where for the first time ever in Pakistan's history, a Pakistan Prime Minister has been charged of contempt of court. What this means, what it would lead to, we are today here to discuss all the consequences of what has happened today in the Supreme Court of Pakistan. To discuss this, I have with me here Mr. Vivek Karju, former ambassador, Major General Ashok Mehta, a defense analyst, and Pramit Pal Chaudhary, foreign affairs editor of the Hindustan Times. Thanks to all my guests for joining me. First, let me go to Mr. Karju. Mr. Karju, unprecedented thing has happened today. The Pakistan Supreme Court has taken the bait, and now what is going to happen?
I think this was on the cards.
Yes.
The court has consistently held that its orders must be obeyed. And if his orders are not obeyed, then the only choice left to the court or to any court is to issue notices of contempt and take action thereafter. Interestingly, the last hearing, which was held by the Chief Justice a couple of days ago, he made an observation that the court will go to any extent to ensure that its orders are adhered to.
Right.
Now, the actual problem, as I see it, is that if the government were to write to the Swiss authorities, then the moment that letter is written, Zardari's position as president becomes untenable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, General Ashok Mehta, the Swiss authorities themselves are saying that we can't take any action. President has immunity. So now the Pakistan Supreme Court is trying to tell the government indirectly that first get Zardari out.
Yeah, that's what the gun is aimed at him.
Yes.
Although the rounds are landing
on Gilani.
On Gilani, but the target is certainly Zardari.
Yes.
And just remember one thing, that it's not just the judiciary, it's the army,
right,
which is prompting,
controlling
this fire. So the
you
fire.
You think the army is behind the judiciary?
Absolutely. There is no doubt in anybody's mind that out of the three power centers now in Pakistan, the Prime Minister, the Chief Justice and the Chief of Army Staff, the Chief of Army Staff and the Chief Justice are together. And there is a history why the army wants this government to go, because this government has had the temerity. You said first time a Prime Minister has been indicted in Pakistan. For the first time in the history of Pakistan, has a Prime Minister sacked the Defense Secretary. And for the first time in the history of Pakistan, has a petition been put in court to say that the government should give in writing that they will not sack the army chief and the ISI. Unprecedented.
All unprecedented things are
happening.
So
what you are seeing is a choreographed enactment of a movement on the part of the army to get rid of this government, not just because of what I have said, but the memo gate.
Right.
Memo gate was the letter. I mean, everybody knows about this. Here, the army has taken the government to court. So
right.
Again, unprecedented.
Absolutely.
And they have charged the government of national betrayal, of treason, right. of treachery. My God, you've never seen these kind of things happen in Pakistan.
Very, very interesting things happening. Pramit, do you agree with the general that the army is firing from the shoulders of the judiciary?
I would slightly differ. I would argue the army and the Supreme Court have the same goal, which is Zardari. But I would argue that the army doesn't really need to control the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will do this on its own. Iftikhar Chaudhary has a personal dislike of Zardari that is so intense that I don't think he needs to take orders from the army. And he said, I don't take orders from the army. I'm doing this because I want to do this as the Chief Justice.
He doesn't need any motivation.
He doesn't need any prompting.
Prompting
anyway. So not from the army. So I think the army is quite happy to sit back and just say, let this happen because it's going to happen on its own anyway. And the army is, I would argue, especially right now, is much reduced compared to its previous sort of strength within the military, within the Pakistan political system. They are clearly supporting Imran Khan and doing various other things, but they're finding it a lot more difficult to control things quite the way they used to before. And the fact that Zardari, they don't control the presidency, which they've always traditionally held. They have a prime minister who is on his own as far as compared to the military, even though Gilani for a long time was wooed by the army and was for a while considered to be in the military camp. The Supreme Court, I would argue, is now an independent force, even though its views are more or less the same as the army's regarding the presidency. And on the political sphere, they've had to prop up a new political institution under Imran Khan to try to see if they can control. This is an army that is not quite what it used to be in terms of its political strength.
Mr. Kaju, do you agree with Pramit that the army today is not what it is? General Ashok Mehta has a different take on this.
Before I come to that, I think I would agree with Pramit in as much as that the Supreme Court is, under Iftikhar, is trying to establish perhaps for the first time the credibility of the judiciary. And to that extent, its actions are leading to a coincidence of interests between the court and the army. Now, I have always believed, and I believe today too, that the ultimate arbiter of Pakistan's destinies is the army. The army's main interest is in three things: in controlling Pakistan's security policies, in controlling its corporate interests,
right,
and in controlling those aspects of its foreign policy which have a bearing on Pakistan's security. The army has not wanted, even in the 90s, if you recollect, the army had not wanted to come directly into the political space and take over reins of authority. Karamat was sacked by Nawaz, the army accepted it. There was a great tussle after Kargil. Kargil put the Pakistan system totally on the boil.
Absolutely.
Again, when did Musharraf act? Or when did the army act in favor of Musharraf? After there was a split in the army, and they acted only when they were left with no choice.
No other choice. Mr. Kaju, we'll come back. We need to go into a short break. In fact, there are a couple of issues. You have made some, Mr. Kaju made some interesting points about how the judiciary is trying to act independently, and there is a coincidence of interests coming together. We will discuss this when we come back. We'll go into a short break now. Please keep watching. Welcome back. We are discussing what has happened in Pakistan today, where the Supreme Court has charged the Prime Minister of Pakistan of contempt of court. General Mehta, interesting point made by Mr. Kaju. Let me turn that what he said a little around and ask you: do you think the democratic institutions of Pakistan are taking roots now, going by what the Supreme Court is doing?
We have to remember, I'll come to that question, that there are now two permanent players in Pakistan. One is the army, as Vivek just said, and the second is now the judiciary. Political parties will come and go. Those will keep changing. And as far as the problem, the nub of the problem is that now you see a civil-military conflict, at least the beginnings of a conflict where there is challenge by the civilian authority of the military suspension. And this is best illustrated in the manner in how things have happened in the last year since Osama bin Laden's capture, or rather his being taken out by the SEALs, but also by some of the actions of the civilian government. The most latest action is that the army wanted to appoint a DG of the cantonments, land cantonments, and it's traditionally been an army retired general. They rejected the name of the military man and put a civilian name there. So just I want to make two other points. That this army is not the same army. It is a diminished army.
It's a weakened army.
It's a weakened army, and what we have to remember is that within the army now, the recent corps commanders meet, which was about last month, end of last month, the discussion was about two things, very interestingly. One, because at that time there was this talk about coup, whether a coup is imminent in Pakistan.
Yes.
And they said, no, we don't need to come into the forefront.
Right.
We are quite happy with the position we are because we exercise in those three areas of foreign policy, corporate interest. So as long as we have that, let the blame come on the civilians. So that is one part of the debate, that no coup. And the second is the worry about the army being overly Islamized and not being a professional army.
And the civilian government is trying to control that.
Yeah, certainly.
Let me come to Pramit. Pramit, let's again. I want to flag this issue again about democratic institutions taking roots. Is it just Supreme Court Chief Justice Iftikhar Chowdhury's personal battle, or is it something? Do you see this taking roots and we having an independent judiciary in Pakistan?
Well, we'll have to see whether it survives. Iftikhar Chowdhury is a particularly unusual Chief Justice, because otherwise the Supreme Court of Pakistan has not been known for
showing this kind of
for this type of spine against the presidency or against anybody in the government. But he has a bench which effectively is himself and a lot of the judges who were taken out by Musharraf and have been reconstituted. So he's been able to, my impression is, to imbibe a certain degree of esprit de corps within them, that we are strong enough, and partly because they can see that the military is weaker, that the presidency for once is not actually controlled by the army. There's a diffusion of power which gives them space to operate.
Which is a good thing if we look at a future of democracy in Pakistan, if there's going to be a future.
I mean, I think I would argue that at the heart of the problem in Pakistan remains the fact that the military has been far too powerful within the system, and has been allowed, in effect, or has ensured that the democratic space in Pakistan is deeply constrained. So as long as that is, you argue that case, then automatically anything that diffuses power away from the army is good in the long run. But it can result in a lot of chaos in the meantime, while the different players sort of jostle with each other. As you can see right now, where the presidency, the prime minister, the judiciary, the army are all essentially in some form of conflict with each other.
Mr. Kadjo, my question to you is, this weakening of the army is a temporary phenomenon, or you think they will come back, they will wait till Zardari is removed, and then they will show their teeth again?
I don't think it's a weakened army. I think it's an embarrassed army. The events of May last year,
its morale is low.
Embarrassed them.
Yes.
I'll just make two short points. The first, the army leadership was embarrassed vis-a-vis the rank and file, its own rank and file. I've held the view that the attack on the American embassy in Kabul, which the Americans themselves admitted was orchestrated by the ISI, was a response to restore the faith of the rank and file in the army leadership. That they could tell the rank and file that here we are willing to beard the lion in its own den. Second, the army was embarrassed because of this action vis-a-vis the people of Pakistan. You
Right.
said that we've given all this to you and you allowed and the ingress of the helicopters and it was in Abbottabad right next to you, you couldn't do anything. All this notwithstanding, when the chips are down, because the Pakistan polity rests, I believe, on the basic premise of a hostile neighbor, which is India, the army will never be an army like a normal army in a democratic setup.
So you think that the army needs to have that kind of a, a muzzle to vis-a-vis India?
I think it's the other way around. I think the Pakistan polity per se rests on the premise that Pakistan can survive only as long as it is opposed to India. They haven't been able to find a true positive identity
Kaju,
for
so
the
you
country, and for that purpose they need an army.
So, Mr. Kaju, you don't believe that if this is your premise, then you don't believe that the democracy can take roots at all in Pakistan. General Mehta?
Quasi-democracy,
No,
not a full democracy, the adambar of a democracy. Okay.
Yeah, I think this conflict will go on. The basic premise is correct, that not just India as an external threat, although everybody in Pakistan today says that India is not the threat. The Americans keep telling them that your threat is internal.
Yes.
You have an internal problem.
Everybody seems to know about it except them.
But the Pakistan army will lose its primacy in the power structure
Right.
if India is not a threat. And therefore, this threat has to be constantly colored and recolored, even though you can see that that's not the threat.
How much does India help in coloring and recoloring
No, I think
this?
India has gone out of its way. It's got nothing to do with India. India has gone out of its way. Otherwise, we have shown the most remarkable strategic restraint as a neighbor. We have been struck again and again from Pakistan, but we have not retaliated against Pakistan. We could have, we should have, but we haven't. And therefore, you have a situation where we have not exacerbated the situation. It is the Pakistanis themselves and the Pakistan army, for the reasons that my dear friend Vivek has mentioned, that if you lose that raison d'etre, then Pakistan army as an institution in Pakistan will lose that aura that
And
it
also
has
those
built around.
those 3 points which Mr. Kaju said about most important thing, those interests which they are. Okay, we will continue this discussion. We need to go to a short break now. Please keep watching. We'll be back soon. Welcome back. We are discussing the consequences of the Supreme Court of Pakistan's order today charging the Prime Minister of Pakistan with contempt of court. Let me come to you, Pramit. Some observers, some people in Pakistan are actually seeing a silver lining in what has happened today. They say that, instead of never in the past has judiciary, there has been a very civil the judiciary and the government, they are battling it out in the courts. Otherwise, normally we would have seen coups. Instead of coups, we are seeing, a very, very decent court. So the rule of law is what is being talked about. So they see it as a silver lining. Do you also see it as a silver lining?
Well, anything that shows that a judiciary can be independent. Unfortunately, right now, the battle seems to be highly personalized. It's Iftikhar Chaudhary versus Zardari, more than the judiciary versus the presidency.
With Gilani being the pawn.
Yes. Well, Gilani, I think, has put himself up as the shield, presumably, and in return for some sort of compensation by Zardari. The game, I think, but overall, yes, the problem, but I think the problem for the military per se, which is at the heart of this, how much can they be diminished? I see three things that could further erode the military standing within Pakistan, which are potentially dangerous for the military and possibly therefore good for Pakistan. One is the fact that Pakistan is increasingly being absorbed by the problems on its western border.
Right.
It's sent 150,000 troops off the Indian border, it's moved them there, and it's getting more and more sucked into Afghanistan. And I think Pakistan had assumed that Afghanistan would be very similar to what it was in the first Taliban regime. But I think it's going to be a lot more different for them in the next 3 years. Second, who is their external supporter? Traditionally, they've had somebody from the outside to support them.
Right.
The United States obviously being the traditional one. Now there are daggers drawn with the United States. And you know, when you go to Washington now, the deep, not just dislike or distrust, but hatred of Pakistan in places like the US Congress now is such that the United States government has basically, it's almost impossible now for them to give money to the Pakistani military. And the military is now looking to Beijing. But China is a very different ballgame from the United States. And they'll find that the Chinese play a very different, much more hard-nosed game when it comes to providing support and money. And the third thing I would argue is the economy of Pakistan. The other day I was going through figures for the Central Bank of Pakistan. 40% of the debt of the country of Pakistan now is 3-month bonds at 13% interest, and they still can't find anybody to buy it. So in effect, the government of Pakistan is buying its own bonds.
Okay.
So they're heading right off a fiscal cliff because they're effectively printing government debt and then selling it back to themselves. This is not sustainable at a time. They've assumed that the Americans will bail them out. I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay. That is he has raised very, very important issues. So let me first go to Mr. Kaju. Mr. Kaju, Pramit has raised extremely important issues. So you hold that there cannot be a democracy, there can only be a quasi-democracy. But the issues which he has raised, are very fundamental and actually threatens the future of the country itself.
Yes, but I would argue opposite to what Pramit is saying. That when times of trouble, people gravitate naturally to the institution which seems to be the most stable. And here it's the army. Yes, I agree that they have a problem on their western border. But again, if you have an enemy on the eastern border and troubles on the western border, the people of Pakistan will go with the army. They will not see the civilian government as their savior. As far as the Americans are concerned, they might hate the Pakistanis, but I would submit to you that there is simply no way in which they can do without the Pakistanis. With Afghanistan, getting out of Afghanistan without the Pakistanis is next to impossible. But even after that, and
after
finally,
they get out of Afghanistan,
even after that, that's what I've said. Even after that, Pakistan is a nuclear power. No one can afford, and the Americans know this. No one can afford a Pakistan going into total disarray and nuclear technology, if not products, going proliferating. No one wants a repeat of the A.Q. Khan episode.
Right.
And lastly, the economy of Pakistan, I do believe that they are in a terrible mess. What Pramit has said is true, but it will be kept afloat. They will not be allowed to go under. That is what I believe.
Okay. General Mehta, see, Kaju's points and Pramit's points. Now, what they're trying to say is that, while Pramit says that it is Pakistan's economy is completely on a downward spiral and anything can happen, whereas he says that will only lead to people moving more and more towards the army. So you see no hope for a democratic revival or in Pakistan.
Yeah, you will see democracy in Pakistan, but this is controlled democracy, controlled by the army. Absolutely no doubt about that. Right now, the problem is this, that this government has alienated the army so much that this army will have no further truck with it. No government in Pakistan has done its full term, so I cannot see how this government will prove an exception. So the option has been...
From what you're saying,
so what you are going to see on 29th of February, 28th or 29th of February, when Mr. Gilani appears before the courts,
He has been exempted from appearing in the court, but whatever the case, hearing will start.
Once
He will appear.
he's indicted,
Directly
then
or
you will either
indirectly.
need to change the prime minister, and once you change the prime minister, then you will automatically. The idea is to have an early election. Early election after March. They don't want these elections. They want the Senate elections. Okay, you can't have, in any case, you need 3 months or 4 months before you have. So, the political, as far as the army is concerned, this government is inconvenient. They will work with some other government so that their measure of control over that government is established.
No, Mr. Karju, from what General Mehta is saying, if Gilani is made to, is found guilty, then he has to move out. See, just replacing Gilani with another
not
prime
help.
minister
No, that's
will
what
not
I'm
work.
saying. That's
So
what
it
I'm
is,
saying,
if
that-
he's moved out, then Zardari also has to move out. Or, isn't it an automatic thing? No.
There are separate elections.
No, but
No,
separate
one
elections
No,
is
but
different
even
matter.
after the elections-
Will Zardari be able to survive? My question is, will Zardari be able to survive if Gilani is found guilty?
No, Zardari well may try to appoint someone else. The real rub is that will a letter be written to the Swiss authorities?
Absolutely.
Now, I
Yes.
don't, and for that purpose, what well may happen is that elections are called and a government of national unity says there is an important step, we can't do it, let a new government, post-elections come in. But even if, I would argue that Imran Khan comes in, he'll certainly write Zardari goes. But even if PPP comes in, the impasse will continue.
It will continue.
Will
No,
continue.
the point is that you're going to see a regime change. There's no doubt early elections will occur. But if I can talk about
Quickly,
the
sir.
second point,
Quickly,
the
we are
United
running
States,
short of time.
there are already, I met a senator in Dubai last week from Pakistan. They have this National Security Council. They have already worked out the new terms of engagement with the United States. Already the tripartite border talks have restarted. Already
Okay.
the terms of re-engagement have been worked out. So neither can Pakistan stay without
US.
the US, nor can the US
Stay
be
without
They
Pakistan.
both need each other.
From last words to you. So the Supreme Court of Pakistan has said the cat among pigeons and there is no
Right.
going back. Is that the sense you get?
Yeah, I think the game now is for, I think the deadlines that the Zardari and Gilani are looking for is the fact that Iftikhar Chaudhry retires, I've forgotten, in May, I think it is. If they can drag this out there, they seem to believe, I think they believe that if he disappears or he moves,
Then all this will come to an
then
end.
the Supreme Court may become a lot more passive.
I don't believe that.
Anyway, there are
I don't
all
believe that can happen.
we have completely run short of time. Wishful thinking. Some say Karju doesn't agree. Anyway, these are interesting times. These are interesting times to keep a close watch on Pakistan. We'll continue to do that, and we'll come back when there are more issues involved. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks to all my guests, Mr. Vivek Karju, Mr. General Ashok Mehta, and Pramit Pal Chaudhary. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on the big picture.